We open on a security guard running away in a panic as we hear Foxy's signature hum close behind him. When he makes it to the exit door it's locked, and he tries to cast an unlocking spell, but it fails. We then see Foxy, charging down the hall at the security guard slicing his stomach open with a swipe of his hook. After we see the title card, it opens back up on a funeral with the camera panning from each face in the crowd showing Aunt Jane, Abby and closing in on Mike as the sounds of a struggle and screams blare over the pastor's sermon. Then a gunshot rings out as we cut to Steve Raglan's office, who reacts nervously to Mike after seeing his full name. We learn 3 things. Mike is a recent graduate of Breakbill School for Magical Pedagogy. He called in a favor to get the job, and his discipline is metallurgy, a natural discipline which he demonstrates. Mr. Raglan gives the new recruit the address of Freddy's and a set of keys, then makes a phone call as he leaves. Night 1. On the first night, Mike wanders around Freddy's while waiting for his instructor, checking every door and room in the building to make sure everything is secure when the doorbell rings. As he goes to the front door, we see the curtains on the main stage and Pirates Cove part slightly, pairs of eyes staring out from the shadows at Mike as he passes. Opening the front door, he's greeted by Vanessa, with whom he attended Breakbills before she left after their 4th year. Once in the security office, Vanessa demonstrates how to activate and deactivate the security wards, explains where the wards are located and reveals that they can all be activated from the security room but require someone to be in the room that each ward is set in to deactivate them. They spend the rest of the night catching up when she introduces the animatronics to him, and as they talk it's implied, they've developed an understanding to not go too deep into each other's past and personal lives. When the night is over, Mike inquiries about Vanessa's early departure from Breakbills, to which she gives a vague reply. After night 1/the break-in. Mike arrives home after his first shift at the abandoned restaurant, and this is where we first meet Max, Mike's roommate and fellow Breakbills graduate in this version, talking to her brother on her cell phone. He asks after Abby, to which Max tells him that she hasn't come out of her room since dinner last night. Mike goes to Abby's room to check in on her and finds her drawing whilst occasionally responding to someone we can't see or hear, indicating that she's psychic, possibly a traveler. It's shown they have a strained but loving relationship when they greet each other before Mike goes to his own room to sleep. Meanwhile, Jeff, Max's brother, pulls up to Freddy's on his motorcycle. In this version he and his friends are looking for his father, the previous security guard, or at least trying to find information on his whereabouts. This is where we officially see the other animatronics in action when Hank and Carl start trashing and stealing from the former restaurant. Each animatronic displays that they can perform a limited form of magic when Bonnie and Chica dispose of the thugs, Bonnie using a barrier spell to prevent Hank's escape, then telekinetically hurling his guitar through the man's chest, and Chica teleporting Carl into random objects, then unleashing her cupcake on him. Jeff gets to the security office where he sees the damage inflicted by his friends. As he leaves to berate them, a pair of silver eyes are shown watching him. We then see from the perspective of this entity as it follows Jeff from room to room, then approaches the young man from behind as he turns around with a look of horror on his face, as we shift to the wall with the shadows of Jeff and a rabbit-shaped figure slashing him across the throat with a knife. Night 2. We come to Mike's house, closing in on him still asleep, as he has a dream about the day his brother, Garrett, was taken. It's implied that he has this dream often, chasing the kidnapper's car as it drives off but fails to catch it. He then turns around to see a young blonde boy drawing something in the dirt. When Mike asks the boy if he saw anything, he only gets a vague warning about a yellow rabbit as the dream comes to an end. Now awake, he hears Max knocking at his bedroom door, saying that Vanessa is outside asking to talk to him. Outside, Vanessa tells Mike about the break-in, reassuring him that the responsible party did so through a back door not included in the wards. On his next shift, Mike cleans the mess left by Jeff and his crew, finding blood in the areas where they were killed. After this, Mike activates the wards from the security office and takes a break to collect his thoughts when he spots a videotape on the far left corner of his desk labeled Party 83. Curious, Mike plays it, and it displays a party for the blonde boy from his dream which glitches out at random intervals, ending with an older boy angrily trying to cast a spell only for it to fail and burst into blue flames as he screams for help before the tape cuts to static. Startled, Mike falls onto the floor and he turns his attention to the security monitors, seeing an animatronic that looks like a yellow version of Freddy in the boy's room scrawling something on the wall underneath the camera before looking up into it at him. Going to check out what the mystery animatronic was doing, he enters the boy's room and finds a message written on the mirror in blood: "Avoid the yellow rabbit." After night 2/Max's search. Coming home, Mike sees Max pulling out of the driveway. When confronted, she tells him that she's going to check in on her brother, Jeff, promising to return before he starts his shift that night. We then switch to Max's perspective as she looks for her brother, starting at his apartment then going to other places that she knows he frequents. After an hour of searching, Max happens upon Freddy's and sees Jeff's motorcycle parked behind the abandoned restaurant. Entering through the same door he used, she looks around for him when she runs into one of the ghost children who leads her to the back rooms. Once there, Max finds the remains of Jeff and his friends and lets out a scream. From the shadows, a yellow rabbit animatronic emerges. This is where we are properly introduced to Springtrap. After a brief magic battle and chase, Max hides behind an arcade cabinet only to be caught and stabbed through the heart by the murderous Lapin, who proceeds to drag her body to the back rooms. Night 3. Unable to get in touch with Max, Mike opts to bring Abby to the pizzeria that night. The siblings find Vanessa's police cruiser parked out front as they walk up to the building. Inside, Vanessa is standing in front of a wall filled with old children's drawings focused on one of a birthday party as visions of the older boy from the video, Mike with a distorted voice crying out for him to stop before he bursts in blue flames, becoming a Niffin, a younger Vanessa using the slashing spell to slice a woman's throat. The blonde boy screaming as a group of older children drag him towards the yellow Freddy, which comes to an end when Mike calls out to her. After Vanessa departs, Mike takes Abby to the security office to sleep while he works his shift. Falling asleep, Mike encounters the blonde boy from his dream earlier that morning and 4 other children. They each explain to him that they were murdered and stuffed into the animatronics by a yellow rabbit, except for the blonde boy, who states his death is what caused the yellow rabbit to start killing. Mike tries to comfort him but is awoken by Abby screaming from the dining room. When he arrives, the animatronics are gathered around Abby as she screams. As Mike moves to intervene, Freddy steps towards him threateningly, only for Abby to step between them to explain that they were just tickling her, showing they're friendly. Mike and Abby play with the animatronics until his shift ends, to which they all give friendly farewells. Just as Mike is heading to the door, he finds Max's phone near the backroom's entrance. After night 3. Once at home, Mike asks Abby about what happened that night, to which she states she went to the bathroom when Bonnie and Chica approached her and then Freddy and Foxy and started tickling her. That's when she tells him about how Mike's predecessor damaged Foxy, resulting in his attack on the previous security guard, and that he, Freddy, and the others saw how caring Mike was towards her, causing them to no longer view him as a threat. Realizing Abby's abilities allow her to communicate with the animatronics, he asks her to come with him again on his next shift, to which she excitedly agrees. Night 4. That night they find Vanessa's car parked in front again and see her looking through what looks to be an extensive blueprint of some kind. When confronted, Vanessa casually dismisses it and asks about Abby's presence there, to which Mike talks about Abby's ability to communicate with Freddy and the others and his belief that she might be able to get information on what happened to his brother. Abby enlists their help in building a fort for the animatronics. When it's complete, Vanessa and Mike go to the supply closet to get tablecloths. They run into the Ella Springlock suit, and she explains about how volatile they are. As Mike helps Vanessa look for tablecloths, he stumbles on a schematic for a rabbit springlock suit with notes about adjustments to the springlocks themselves for use in spellcasting and a photo of a partially decayed yellow rabbit suit. Showing this to Vanessa, who scolds him for sticking his nose where it doesn't belong when they hear Abby scream. Running to the scene, they find Foxy, Bonnie and the Golden Freddy animatronic fending off Springtrap as Freddy and Chica stand guard over Abby. Vanessa fires off a few spells to help Foxy, Bonnie and Golden Freddy in their efforts to defeat the Yellow Rabbit, and Mike runs to his sister's side. Springtrap eventually pushes his way through the barrage with a powerful telekinetic charm and advances towards Abby. Freddy and Chica lunge at the evil animatronic with spells of their own, only to be fended off with an electrical spell. Mike stands between the Yellow Rabbit and his sister, only for Abby to step out from behind him and perform a force push on Springtrap, sending him flying into an arcade cabinet. As he gets back to his feet, the yellow bear grapples Springtrap from behind and teleports away. Vanessa gets Mike and Abby out of the abandoned restaurant, and once outside she confronts them both about Abby's knowledge of battle magic, which Abby confesses that the night of their parents' death a robber broke into the house, and she saw their father perform the spell before he was shot and killed. Vanessa urges the two of them to follow her, and they drive off together. After night 4/the plan. Vanessa brings the siblings to a police supply outpost to rest and plan their next move. She reveals the schematic she was looking at was for a ward that would render Springtrap powerless. Mike cross-references this with the blueprint of his Springlock suit, and the two begin to form a plan to bring him down for good. After this and a montage of Vanessa helping Mike relearn the ropes of battle magic, they decide to get some sleep. During this, Mike finds himself in the dream about Garrett's kidnapping. Only when he chases after the car, he's alerted by Vanessa's voice telling him about the Yellow Rabbit coming for him. Then when he turns around, he sees an anthropomorphic version of Springtrap charging at him, knife in hand. After a brief fight, Mike starts to gain the upper hand and reveals he's figured out he's Steve Raglan, aka William Afton. But as he's about to kick the anthropomorphic rabbit out of his dreams, Springtrap slices Mike's arm, causing him to lose concentration on the spell. And as Afton moves in to deliver the killing blow, Abby appears and shuts down the entire dream. After Afton's attempt on Mike, the three gather supplies for the plan. Worried for her safety, Mike drops Abby off at their Aunt Jane's house to watch after her despite his sister's protests. With that, Mike and Vanessa set off for Freddy's, ready to enact their plan. Night 5. Arriving at Freddy's, Mike and Vanessa come up. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy gathered around something. Getting closer, they see it's the dismembered remains of Golden Freddy, with Freddy clutching the yellow bear's head. This causes Vanessa to break down and reveal her motivations for bringing down Afton. During her younger brother, Evan's birthday party, a group of children shoved his head into the mouth of the Fredbear animatronic as a prank, only for the jaw to crush his head and instantly kill him. Driven by rage, her older brother, Michael, tried to cast a spell to retaliate but failed and was transformed into a Niffin. And driven by his grief and hatred, Afton killed the children responsible for Evan's death, but this stirred something in him, and he continued to kill children, especially after learning that Evan's spirit possessed Golden Freddy, resulting in the missing children's incident. Realizing he was no longer the father she knew, Vanessa endeavored to learn all she could from magic to police procedure to bring William down. Meanwhile, Abby is at Aunt Jane's house setting up a teleportation glyph to break into Freddy's when the spirit of Evan approaches her, telling her about how the wards on the abandoned restaurant keep anyone from entering via magical means, and offers to take her there. As she leaves with the ghost boy, she finds Aunt Jane unconscious on the floor, to which he confesses that she saw him and passed out due to fright, apologizing profusely. Back at the pizzeria, Mike and Vanessa diligently enact their plan with the help of the animatronics. The two launch into a series of complex tuts and intricate verbal incantations to construct the ward, and are nearing completion when Springtrap interrupts by casting a sleep spell, causing the duo to fall unconscious. Coming to Mike, finds himself strapped into an animatronic mask assembly device, which he uses his metallurgy discipline to convert into a harmless metal ball. Once free, he goes to look for Vanessa, who he finds still unconscious in the backroom storage along with the bodies of Max, Jeff, his friends, and the previous security guard. Upon waking her, the two formulate a new plan to use Mike's metallurgy discipline to disable the modified spring locks in the Springtrap to delay Afton's spellcasting long enough for Vanessa to finish the ward to render him powerless, then turn him over to the authorities. And this is where the story differs, as I had 3 different endings regarding Afton's final fate in mind for this story and couldn't decide on which one I liked better. I will now cover these endings one by one and you can decide which one you like better. Ending number 1, Mike's Revenge. Once the new plan is formed, Mike and Vanessa head into the dining room to confront Springtrap, and a magic battle between the policewoman and her father ensues as Mike works to disable the spring locks. The animatronics help during the fight with Freddy, Bonnie and Chica setting up a shield to prevent the yellow rabbit from escaping, and Foxy helping Vanessa in keeping him distracted enough for Mike to be able to start deactivating the spring locks. Catching on to what's happening, Afton removes the rabbit mask, deactivating the modified spring locks entirely, and begins charging towards Mike with his knife. Just before he can close the distance, Vanessa darts between them, taking the killing blow to her stomach. Suddenly Abby runs up at Afton using telekinetic charms to hurtle tables, chairs, and whatever else she can at the murderous man in the rabbit suit. But he manages to deflect one of the objects back at the young magician, knocking her unconscious, then advancing towards her. Enraged, Mike charges at Afton using a metallurgy spell to destroy his knife and tackling him to the ground, then pummeling, then strangling the child killer. Afton manages to perform a weak force push on Mike to get him off, then gets up to run. Mike gets back to his feet, driven by rage and determination, goes after the murderer, but Freddy steps in his way, to which Mike uses a teleportation spell to get past him. Catching up to Afton, he uses another metallurgy spell to activate the spring locks in the leg of the Springtrap suit, causing him to collapse onto the floor. Having his brother's killer at his mercy, Mike brutally interrogates him on the whereabouts of Garrett's remains, and after barraging him with battle magic, Afton tells the older brother where they can be found. After which, Mike takes the rabbit mask and puts it on Afton, then activates the rest of the spring locks with a spell and walks off as Afton dies to go check on Abby. The building begins to collapse as the siblings carry the unconscious Vanessa out, with the animatronics following close behind them. Abby, Mike and Vanessa make it out, but the animatronics are trapped inside. Realizing the key is what keeps the wards active, Mike destroys it, allowing Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy to topple out of the building as it completely crumbles. Aunt Jane peels into the parking lot of Freddy's with an ambulance and police cars swarming in behind her, and then out of seemingly nowhere the now Dean Fogg comes onto the scene to question Mike. Sometime later, Mike and Abby visit a comatose Vanessa in the hospital, thanking her for everything, mentioning that Garrett's remains were properly laid to rest next to their parents and that the animatronics were taken to Breakable's proper. We then cut to Dean Fogg's office at Breakable's, where after a brief conversation with the recently appointed dean where he commends Abby for her bravery, Mike inquiries about Breakable's interest in Freddy's, to which Fogg reveals it was for the protection of the spirits of the children, especially Jeremy, the child possessing Bonnie, who was Fogg's nephew. Then Dean Fogg states there are other Freddy's restaurants where Afton inflicted the same fate on other children he murdered, and offers Mike a job helping to extract them. After the credits, we close in on the ruins of Freddy's as Evan's spirit stands in front of Afton's body as the murderer closes his now mechanical fist, saying, "I always come back." Ending number 2, Don't Fuck with Abby Schmidt. During the fight, Mike is successful in deactivating the modified spring locks, but this only infuriates Afton, who starts to move in on him until Vanessa shoots him in the back 3 times. Then he turns on his daughter, stabbing her to death before turning his attentions back on the new security guard. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy step in the way to staunch his advance, but are rendered unconscious with a powerful electrical spell. Abby arrives at Freddy's just as Afton pins her brother to a wall, ready to deliver the killing blow. In a moment of purest duress, Abby performs a spell that paralyzes Afton, then performs battle magic to snap his neck. Then when Afton's body crumples to the ground, Abby runs to Mike's side, checking up on the animatronics en route. Carrying Vanessa's body out with them, Mike and Abby head for the exit when the building begins to violently shake. The siblings run for the exit with Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy in tow, but just as Abby and Mike make it out with Vanessa's body, the animatronics are held back by the wards. Mike, having figured out earlier that the key is really what keeps the wards intact, destroys it, allowing the animatronics to escape. Just as the abandoned restaurant completely collapses, Aunt Jane pulls into the parking lot with an ambulance and the police right behind her. Sometime later, Mike and Abby visit Vanessa in the hospital to thank her for everything. Just as they get ready to leave, they're stopped by Dean Fogg, who inquires about the events at Freddy's. After a brief recollection of events, the recently appointed dean commends both for their acts of bravery and quick thinking more towards Abby than Mike. Then Mike asks about what Breakables wanted with Freddy's, to which Fogg states it was for the protection of the spirits of the murdered children, especially the spirit of his nephew, Jeremy, the boy who possesses Bonnie, and informs the two of them that the animatronics have been safely relocated to Breakables, much to Abby's delight. Fogg then offers Mike a new job helping to relocate the other haunted animatronics at the other Fazbear restaurants, even mentioning Garrett's spirit/remains may be amongst them. After the credits, Abby is doing homework in her room when the spirit of Evan, now her familiar, emerges from the Golden Freddy mask, warning that his father is still out there, stating, "He comes back, he always comes back," to which Abby smiles, saying, "And we'll be ready." Ending number 3, Nif and Vanessa. Before the fight starts, Vanessa hands Mike a binding box in case the plan to deactivate Afton's modified suit fails under the pretense he might turn himself into a Niffin. Abby arrives during the earlier stages of the fight, assisting with the force push spell and a few telekinetic charms to keep Afton distracted while Mike works on deactivating the modified spring locks, but can only manage to deactivate a few of them before Afton cancels out his spell. In a desperate bid to buy Mike time to perform the spell required to complete their plan, Vanessa launches Rain Man Ultra at her father, prompting an infuriated Afton to lunge at and choke her, knocking Abby out when she attempts to intervene. Once he turns his attentions to the unconscious girl, Vanessa starts to cast Rain Man Ultra but purposefully makes a mistake, becoming a Niffin, killing her terrified father. Mike is forced to box the newly transformed Vanessa as the building begins to collapse. Mike and the now conscious Abby run for the door as the abandoned restaurant collapses, with Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy following behind. Just as Mike makes it through the door, he shatters the key to destroy the wards keeping the animatronics inside, and they all topple out. Aunt Jane arrives on the scene with police and medical personnel in tow, as well as Dean Fogg, who's curious to know what happened. Sometime later, Mike, Abby and Aunt Jane stand around Garrett's new grave, this being possible after finding an old journal of Afton's revealing the locations of his victims' bodies. Dean Fogg again approaches Mike and after a brief conversation reveals that Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy have been safely relocated to a building located on Breakables campus. Mike inquires as to what his former alma mater wanted with Freddy's in the first place, to which Fogg states it was for the protection of the spirits of Afton's victims, but specifically mentions his own personal investment in the pizzeria was due to Jeremy, the spirit possessing Bonnie, his nephew. The recently appointed dean then hands the ex-security guard a business card mentioning a job helping to relocate other victims of Afton who haunt the other Freddy's locations, before walking off. As Mike leaves his brother's grave, he passes Vanessa's grave thanking her for everything, then walking away with his sister and aunt, but turns as he sees what looks like Vanessa standing in the distance, but sees nothing when he turns around and just leaves the cemetery. After the credits, we return to Garrett's grave as Fiery Blue Hand places the young boy's toy plane on top of the gravestone with a playful voice saying, "I'll see you around, Mikey." And that is the end of the video, everyone. I hope you all have a good day, and if you like what you see, then please consider donating to my Ko-Fi page, linked in the description below, as it really helps me out in building my creative career. Enjoy yourselves. I'm Calvin and this has been Amalgam Image 0.